Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book, Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. Two, because I'm a fan of punk music. And three, it's just more fun, right? Anyway, if this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. And please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. Anyway, that's enough for me right now. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Tue Søttrup, who has been delivering excellent customer service for more than 20 years and is currently Chief CX Evangelist at Dixa, where he's also apparently carefully nurturing a small bonsai tree called Gen Zen. Hi, Tue. How are you doing?
Hey, Adrian. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast. I've been very much looking forward to this conversation and must admit that Gen Zen is not doing too well after the pandemic and a long extended winter break.
Excellent. Well, maybe we can dig into that a little bit later. But for the listeners who are not familiar with you and your work and also Dixa, can you give us a bit of a thumbnail sketch, just to paint a background picture?
Yeah, sure. I've been working in customer service for more than 20 years, both as an agent and as a manager. 5 years ago, I joined Dixa, and Dixa is a customer engagement platform supporting phone, chat, email, and social media. And since I had been working in that field, I was brought in to help translate what the developers could build into something customers actually wanted. And when I joined Dixa, we were 7 people, and now we're just under 230. So it's been quite an exciting journey. I've been wearing many hats during my time at Dixa, but have always been in the crossfield between product and sales. For me, it's all about understanding what challenges brands have and how they can be solved in the best way, both for customers and for agents.
Awesome. Now, we were talking before about setting this up, and we've known each other for a little while. I mean, I remember talking to Mads Vasilius, who is the CEO and one of the founders of Dixa, about kind of what you guys have been up to a wee while ago. I don't want to count the number of years it was. I think it's probably at least kind of 2 or 3 years ago. So I've always kind of followed your work. And now I know that Dixa recently released a new research report called Reconnecting the Customer Experience, 3 Ways to Catapult Your Customer Service in 2022. So I'm a bit of a lover of research, a bit of data, a bit of percentage points here and there. Love it. So can you tell me a little bit about the report and sort of why you conducted the research and also some of the main headlines?
Yeah, sure. From our side, we wanted to know what the challenges customer service agents have on a daily basis. So we surveyed 1,500 agents in America and in the UK. Mm-hmm. We also surveyed about 3,000 consumers as well. So we got 2 sides of the story. Mm-hmm. I would say the main headline is that there's a lot of work to do to improve the agent experience in general. And some of the percentages that came out of it are quite interesting. 74% of agents feel that they are missing important customer information and context to provide a better service. And I think that's really telling of an area that needs to be done something in. 60% of agents feel it's very important that they're truly helping customers. And 42% of customers say that they need to repeat information almost every time to resolve one inquiry. This, of course, creates friction for both the customer and the agent. And maybe the most important statistic here is that 80% of customers are likely to spend more money with a company after a positive customer experience.
So I should say that many of these things are really quite familiar. Like that whole idea about people repeating themselves and kind of like it's quite familiar sort of stuff. But then what I did find interesting there was many some of the findings that came out of it were really interesting. And one of the things I wanted to pick up on that with you on a couple of those sort of things, if I may, because just to get your view on it, because the report also found that said only 25% of agents report that inquiries are served to them automatically. But your study found that when inquiries are routed automatically, then 68% of agents report achieving a CSAT of 5, or not more, because that's top end of the scale. So I guess my question is, with all this kind of idea around, we've moved and we've had to be forced to move to more of a remote kind of digital kind of environment, and now we're trying to figure out the kind of the hybrid sort of thing, and the reliance on kind of technology and operating in the cloud and things. And I was thinking, so why is the routing thing so low, given that it produces, when you get it right, it produces better outcomes?
I see that the answer to that is in two parts.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is because of a lack of support for or ease of setting it up in the current systems that the organizations are using, and partly because managers are not prioritizing it. There is no doubt that when you ensure the right conversation goes to the right agent in the right order, CSAT is increased. And from our point of view, we think it's really important that brands connect with their customers like you would do with a friend, make it a natural conversation. And to do that, you need to talk to the person that has the biggest skill in solving the issue that you have. And that can be done by routing it based on content of the message or something in the backend system, and then matching it with the agent that has the highest capability in solving that issue.
The thing I'm frustrated, I get frustrated by is like some of this stuff that keeps coming up time and time again. And, it's almost like, it feels like the answers are there, the roadmap is there, and how do we proceed to produce these better outcomes? I mean, you said kind of then, this is like current systems are holding things kind of back. Then that makes me think about people are locked into contracts and all these different sort of things. And that's fine. And we probably just have to deal with that, because that'll kind of happen over time. But then the idea around about it's not prioritized by managers, that confuses me a little bit, because it's almost a bit like, well, as a manager, you're probably wanting to improve performance. You're probably incentivized actually to improve performance. So, but if you're not prioritizing it, is that because they don't know about it, or is it they don't know how to do it? I mean, what's going on kind of here?
It's a combination of all of the above. A manager is very often focused on ensuring that their agents are feeling good and having one-to-ones and training and upskilling agents. And very often they have inherited a way of working, probably also a system that they're working in, and they don't have the knowledge or the resources to go into that system and try to set it up in a different way. So one way to solve it is to engage with a partner that can help them become successful with the tool that they're using. Because very much they feel like they are alone on a desert island, and they are just continuing to do what they've done before. And it can be difficult to stop up and try to do things in a different way, because they are actually unaware of different ways that it can be done. And a good example is if you prioritize conversation, let's take an e-commerce business where delivery date is today or tomorrow. If you handle those conversations first, you avoid those customers having to reach out and repeat themselves on a different channel. And moreover, it also means that the customers that would otherwise have to wait even longer because the customer reached out twice on multiple channels, they are handled in a more efficient manner. So it's not about treating customers differently. You should treat them the same, but it's about prioritizing the most time-sensitive issues first, because that actually brings down the total volume of incoming conversations.
Yeah. I think also what's fascinating as well, you mentioned kind of like managers are focused on their agents and how they're doing and their well-being and everything else. But I think that's what's also fascinating is that, and that's where we get into this domain of sort of employee experience and then agent experience, and people are focusing on the well-being side of things. And that's great, and that's absolutely right. But I think it feels to me that then when doing that, people are also kind of then potentially forgetting the operational side of the kind of agent experience. And how there's horror stories that people are using all these different apps to find kind of answers to different questions and all these different sort of things, and actually how much of an impact that sort of experience actually has on their well-being, if you know what I mean. And that actually they do have a symbiotic sort of relationship, because they also kind of found in the research that said when agents were asked how they find answers to customer questions, 70% said their answers are located in other apps, so they have to go looking for it, as it were. Then 29%, shockingly, said that they Googled it. You're like going, my word. And 27% said they had to ask other kind of agents. Then another finding from the research kind of said that actually 59% reported that they lack the knowledge to provide better service. And it makes me think of that whole operational side of the kind of the agent experience, or to facilitate and deliver a better customer experience. It's like, it all feels very lacking. I mean, what's going on here? I mean, again, is it our firms not investing in knowledge bases and training, and are they not doing that because it's a time and resource thing, or is it just that they don't understand it, or there's that inherited way of working that you were talking about before? I mean, dude, yeah, that's why I have my hair cut so short, is then because I can't pull my hair out, because it's just like, what?
Yeah, that is a big part of it. I think it's mainly due to the fact that brands don't have a process for how to work with knowledge. At Dixa, both in our product and internally, we work with KCS, or knowledge-centered service. And this is a methodology. It's not a tool, but it is a methodology where you make documentation of how to solve a problem part of the problem-solving process.
Right.
And that means that when you get a question from a customer, you use a support article to solve the problem. If that article has incorrect information, you either update it or flag it so it can be corrected. If no support article exists, it is your responsibility as an agent to add that draft article. And there's no doubt that working with KCS in a structured way has a significant impact on agent empowerment, because one, they are using trusted information, and two, it results in customers getting consistent answers regardless of what agent they're communicating with, and regardless of what channel it is. And back to your frustration about using Google all the time, we engaged with a large gaming company in the US, and they didn't work with KCS before. And they looked at how many of the inquiries we're getting from our players do we have documented, and it was only 29%. And
right.
That meant that in the other cases, the agents would go to Google, they would go to Stack Overflow, they would see what other players had written as an answer to this question, and then they would copy paste that back to players. So they were very much dependent on that agent's ability on searching on Google and Stack Overflow to find those answers. After they implemented KCS, they went to having documented 85% of the processes in the span of 2 months. And that is a world of difference.
I think it also kind of shows that kind of if people are doing that they're not, and the knowledge is out there, because customers will try and help themselves and or help each other, sort of thing. So they're more than likely that they've created the knowledge, that kind of brands, when they find that there's that deficit, they can actually probably crowdsource that, or kind of almost like curate that back into their internal kind of like systems, and just like close that gap between finding it and sharing it, as it were.
Definitely. And the challenge that I see is that very often information is also owned by multiple departments within an organization. So something that is the internal knowledge that the agents are using is usually owned by customer success. And then you have information that is on the website that might be owned by marketing. And sometimes those articles are saying two different things. And that is, of course, really difficult for agents. And to just give an example of how that plays out in real life, I spent a day at a prospect in Ipswich, and one of the agents that were working on chat, I counted the number of tabs that person was working in trying to help one customer, and that was 23 different tabs trying to help one customer on one channel. And that is, of course, something that can be really distracting and very difficult for the agents to find the information that they need at the right point in time.
And can I just say, for anybody that wants to imagine what that looks like and feels like, is open up a browser and then open up 23 different tabs. And then try and remember what each tab is for specifically. And kind of see how many kind of like, you'd actually, even if you've got a big screen and you've got 23 tabs across the top of your browser that are all open, including maybe your email inbox and, maybe it's your kind of help desk system or your kind of Dixa kind of like panel or whatever it might be. And you've got another 23 kind of things. It's like, try and remember all of those things and where they all sit kind of in those browser tabs, and you'll quickly find out that it's a nightmare. And so that's not the worst I've heard of it. I've heard of 45 different apps at one point from kind of, which is a proper outlier, but like 23 different apps is frightening to try and kind of understand where everything is. And so it's a real kind of problem.
It is a big problem. And for this particular agent, it was 2 large screens. So there was a lot of clicking around in the wrong tabs, trying to find the information that the agent needed to help one customer on one channel.
Yeah, that's crazy. And if you think about all the kind of the seconds and the minutes that they get taken up, kind of doing that, they're not on each kind of customer inquiry, whether it's a call or whether it's kind of text-based or whatever, it just takes time. All those kind of minutes, the seconds and minutes, they all add up. But when you think about all of those things and you add in the effects of, the great resignation, whatever that means, that people are looking around for new opportunities, whether it's kind of pent up demand for 2 years worth of kind of like working kind of remotely. And there's also a reevaluation of what people want from work. But then you add in further that the whole perennial agent churn problems, which sometimes up to between 25 and 40% in many kind of contact centers or help teams. And then the fact that some research sources are reporting that at least 50% of teams are facing higher volumes. And many are actually start having to reduce their headcount. So there's like support teams are facing this torrid sort of time right now, but there's some real kind of problems that people need to act on, because this all feeds through to overall service and overall experience. And I know that you guys at Dixa, particularly are promoting kind of agent well-being and performance and all this and a conversational, approach and trying to simplify all of that sort of stuff, which is brilliant. But I also know that you're talking about the kind of the soft side of things as well. How do you keep agents happy? And you wrote something about this, which is called How to Reduce Agent Churn Using 3 Pillars of Agent Happiness. And I was like, I love a bit of a framework. So to help us maybe navigate our way out of this kind of torrid, and currently we're here in the UK, we're in a bit of a stormy time right now because there's a whole bunch of storms that are coming off the Atlantic, so it's quite windy outside. Can you help us navigate our way out of this or past this by telling us a bit more about these 3 pillars?
Of course. I think something that we often forget is that agents are often spending 8 hours a day within the tool. And often they didn't choose the tool. It's something that their manager chose. And of course, you need to start by having the right foundation in place. And this is the agent's work environment, the tools that they're using, and most importantly, the empowerment for them to make their own decisions. And if we dip into the pillars, then the first pillar is for the agents to know what the customer is contacting you about, and also what that customer has contacted you about before on other channels.
Right.
So the what is really important. The second pillar is knowing who the customer is. And this can be done by pulling in information from the brand's backend system. So the agent can see how much money the customer has spent, the last order status, the segment the customer in, or other information that can help the agent. And this, of course, allows the agent to deliver a personalized experience at scale, because we know that customers want to be recognized when they engage with a brand.
Mm-hmm.
The third pillar is knowing how to solve the customer's issue. And this is where knowledge and the KCS methodology comes in. So when you have these three pillars in place, the what, the who, and the how, then agents don't need to go to multiple systems or 23 or 42 different tabs to find information or solutions. They can actually focus on providing great customer experiences. And this is about removing friction, not only for the agents, but also for customers, to make both of their daily work effortless.
So Tue, that's really interesting. And rather sort of like kind of, I mean, I wanted to dig into the kind of the different kind of elements of the three kind of pillars, the kind of, the what, the who, and the how, because they all kind of talk to perennial sort of problems. I really like the idea of this knowledge-centered service, the how, and that kind of builds out kind of things, because it's almost like if you don't figure out how you want to try and go about things, then it becomes difficult, because you're always just reacting sort of thing, and you never like stop to try and figure out, where's my keystone, where's my cornerstone that we're going to build from. But rather than actually digging into it and talking kind of like theoretically about it, do you have examples of brands that you're working with that are successfully tackling some of these problems that we've talked about? The agent happiness, dealing with this kind of the churn, thinking about, the knowledge, the how, as it were, access of knowledge and the sharing of knowledge, the routing and all that type of stuff. So people that are successfully tackling those problems that you can share with us, because I think the thing that's important is, for me, I find that talking about some of these things theoretically is all very well and good, but it sometimes leaves people a little bit cold, if you know what I mean. And sometimes it's facts and figures don't move us, but stories kind of move us and inspire us, because they show us what the art of the possible is. So if you've got some examples of brands that you're working with that are tackling this, that you can tell us about, and tell us about what they're doing and how they're benefiting, that would be brilliant, because it sort of just brings us all of this to life, as it were, and it gives people hope that you can get past all this stuff.
Yeah, really important with hope, especially in the situation that we've been in with the last couple of years.
Yeah, indeed.
We work very closely with Rafa, the world's finest cycling clothing.
Yeah,
they are supporting bicycle enthusiasts across multiple channels globally. Mm-hmm. And Rafa had an inspiration before Dixa to become a global One Rafa team. They felt they were very fragmented across different channels, across different markets. And to unlock that opportunity, they needed a platform that was within the same mindset about not having siloed ways of thinking and working.
Right.
And from their point of view, Dixa has provided them with this one screen wonder. And if we look at some of the metrics that are really important, then Rafa saw as an improvement in CSAT scores of 14%, a 22% increase in efficiency, and a 17% increase in customer retention. And it is really important for a brand that is more like a club that you're a member of, that you have a really good and consistently positive experience whenever your customers reach out to you. So they kind of turned it around from being very globally distributed to be one team that supported each other across the different markets. So if there was a bigger backlog in one market, then they could use resources from another team, and in that case get back to the customer faster, because that's also some of the things that are important to customers, to get a rapid response and have their issue resolved quickly.
And no, I mean, I understand that, and sort of managing demand across different kind of geographies, and kind of how people can pitch in to help each other. So you end with this global kind of picture, as it were. I guess you can also kind of like means that you can extend your office hours or your support hours because you almost like pass the baton. You like follow the sun type of approach in many ways. But I think what I wanted to ask was about the 22% improvement in efficiency. Can you explain to me what does that mean? Is that like in terms of response time to actually resolution time? What is that? What is that improvement? What's in there?
That is based on the number of conversation that is handled in an hour. Not that you can look at that alone, because if you're very fast, you're not necessarily good.
Yeah.
So it need to balance it with a high CSAT that also increase. But we see in a lot of platforms out there, then agents are working in one or more shared inboxes. And what happens is that humans are humans, and agents are, in most cases, human as well. And they will go into the inbox, and then they actually end up reading a lot of tickets that they're not responding to. And every time mentally they are trying to answer it, and if it's too difficult, they will skip it and go to the next one. And they often do that in most of the organizations that I spend time with. That's what I see time and time again. In Dixa, we try to avoid that situation by having all conversations offered to agents just as you're used to with a phone call. And when you receive a phone call, you don't ask the customer what's your issue about, and then they say, I want to know if you have this bicycle in blue. And then you tell the customer, oh, that's not so important. I'm going to put you back into the queue, and then I'm going to wait for the next customer that might have a more urgent issue. But that's actually how we treat email. And every time agents have to make these micro decisions, which conversation should I work on, which is most important right now? And we try to take that away from the agents and instead build a business logic so you serve the most important conversation to the agents. So they feel that less conversations are coming in because they're only exposed to the conversations they're actually working on. And they also feel they are more efficient because they are not mentally answering a lot of conversations that they are not actually answering in the end. And that means that they can focus on what they're working on, and that in turn increases efficiency.
Awesome. So tell me, because that goes back to the whole kind of routing thing that you were talking about before, and and you're talking about how agents, if they're working out shared inboxes, will go and scroll down through things and then try and almost like mentally try and answer them. Like, can I do that one? Can I do that one? No. Okay, that I can do that one, sort of thing. So I guess the efficiency when you're using routing is you're taking out that sort of like scrolling and reading and trying to mental sort of like heavy lifting, as it were. But I guess my question would also kind of be is like, how does that work as well? Because I know the system must also kind of like see there's a business logic around routing and where things are going, and it must be dependent on expertise. So you would route things to people based on, I guess, expertise, kind of past history, past success, as well as availability and all that type of stuff, because you've got to manage all these different sort of things. But does that also kind of, how does that work in terms of making sure that you're balancing out skills and sort of experience, as it were? Because otherwise you might end up with like one person who's an expert in a very kind of like minute sort of thing, and all the queries about that go to them, if you know what I mean. But actually what you want is one more rounded expertise, because then you build in resilience into the system and into the team and the knowledge base, right?
Definitely. I think we see a world where most agents have to be generalists. They have to be very good at a lot of stuff. And a way to overcome that is, of course, the way that you work with knowledge. So regardless of what department that you're in, then you have knowledge that can help you support you in solving the issue that the customer has. And a very important part of that is also when you get an inquiry from a customer and you use a specific support article, you need to make a note that you use this support article to solve the customer's issue. Because if it didn't solve the customer's issue, then there's either something wrong with your process or with the support article that then needs to be updated. And again, you can avoid having an agent just trying the same thing that didn't work for the customer the last time, because that would end up having the customer to repeat themselves, and they don't want to do that. So the agent needs to know that this was attempted to solve the customer's issue. It didn't solve the issue for the customer, and I need to do something else to solve this particular customer's issue. And the only way to do that is to tying the knowledge that you use into the conversations that you get from customers.
Right. And Now you told me about the Rafa example, and that's that's kind of great, and then taking this kind of one Rafa, one team sort of approach. Is there another example that you can share with us? If people are not in the market for fancy cycle wear, that is.
I think where we are a really good match for different customers, it's brands where they want to provide a very personal experience. They are very much wanting to build relationships with their customers, and they are not micromanaging the agents. They are not looking at much besides CSAT, because it's a true measure of how the customers feel. And then also having a solution where it is scalable, because we know that our future will look quite different in 6 and 12 months than it does now. And brands needs to be agile to change the setup, the way that they work, the way that their teams are structured. It can be that they get a new product, they get a new area of responsibility, and they need to be able to put a group of people that are experts in that, not generalists, but experts, and they need a flexible solution that can overcome that. Besides Rafa, that are in multiple markets, Goodie Box is a good example. They are selling these beauty boxes on subscription, so you get a box every month with some hand cream and mascara and other things that you can be really happy about. And that is, of course, customers that needs a really good experience every time, because otherwise they will not continue to have their subscription. And that means that Goodie Box, in turn, needs to focus on meeting the customer's expectations on every single interaction, and not only doing that in the Danish market, but also in the other 10 markets that they are in.
Right. Awesome. So you're kind of like, you're sort of in the thick of it, and I wanted to kind of like move on and sort of ask you about what you kind of see as being, what does the future look like? Sort of gaze into your crystal ball. But before I do that, I wanted to ask you kind of, we've kind of had a bit of a random meander around some of this research and some of the pillars and things, which is all good, which it feels to me like a bit of a churning sort of sea, and actually we're trying to give people some clues in terms of how to steady the ship, as it were, if you pardon the kind of the metaphor. But is there anything else that we've missed out that you'd like to add that you think people should be paying attention to kind of right now, before I ask you to peer into your crystal ball and tell us what the future looks like?
Yeah, I think it is vital for brands to focus on the agent experience, because we can clearly see that happy agents create happy customers. And happy customers spend more money, and that makes a happy organization and ultimately happy shareholders.
Awesome. So that side, I think that's it's really important. But I also want you to kind of like imagine you've got a crystal ball in front of you right now.
I do.
Good. Thank you. And wearing a bandana as well, sort of like looking like a fortune teller. So where do you think the future, or what does the future of service and experience look like for you? And also, tell us a little bit about your view, but given that, what do you think some of the big sort of hurdles or challenges that we're going to need to navigate if we're going to be successful? What do you think?
If we start with the future of service and experience, then I see brands moving away from seeing customer service as a cost center and instead seeing them as a value center. We see a general focus that is shifting from looking at annual recurring revenue to net revenue retention. Because for many brands, it is cheaper to retain a customer than to acquire a new customer. Since the pandemic, it's so easy for customers to move from one brand to another, and customer acquisition cost is really, really high. And if you do the math, if you not only retain but expand on your existing customer base, you are going to make more money on the bottom line. And that's something that brands are realizing. And to do that, you need to ensure that you deliver a consistently good experience every single time your customers reach out to you. If we look at some of the key challenges that I see lying ahead, then it is balancing the customer's desire for self-service with a seamless handover to a human agent when they can't find the answer they need. And that will actually mean that there will be an increase in the demand for agent skills as more of the simple and easy questions will be solved or even deflected by self-service. On the other hand, it also means that when you actually speak to a customer, that is your chance to build a relationship with that customer. In Denmark, we have this food delivery box where you can subscribe to get a meal, and they can see that if they talk to their customers, those customers that they speak to, because they are very much focused on delivering a good experience, that customer will spend more time with them as a customer and also spend more money. And they have actually been able to put a dollar amount on it. So it's the customer lifetime value of a customer that they speak to increases with 120 pounds. So this is something that makes it quite easy for that brand to go out and proving the return on investment of CX.
That's great. I mean, so there's an improvement of £120 kind of in spend. Do you know of what base that is and what sort of percentage uplift?
No, sorry, I don't have those metrics.
Don't worry. I mean, it's like the key point is like it's more money. If you speak to them, then it gives you a chance to kind of create a better kind of like relationship with them, and then they they feel more inclined to kind of to spend more money with you, which is brilliant.
Definitely, and an example that I tend to use is that if you buy a book from 2 different online bookstores and they just arrive on time, then you are not more likely to buy with either of them the next time. Sure. But if something went wrong with the delivery of one of the books and you were in contact with the customer service department and you ended up feeling that you had a good experience with that brand, you will be more likely to buy the book from that brand the next time you buy a book.
Yeah, and in case in point, that what that illustrates is this idea that the service recovery paradox, the idea that a brand that responds well when something goes wrong can create a higher level of satisfaction and kind of loyalty than if nothing had gone wrong. Now, I should point out that's not a strategy for success, and people shouldn't go start creating kind of problems in order to respond well to them. I hope people aren't doing that because that's slightly disingenuous. But it is a bit of a paradox. But it's to set yourselves up to respond well to when something goes wrong is realize that there is a huge amount of value in that. So, okay, thank you for that. That's great. So we talked about a bunch of different things. And I wanted just to boil it down a little bit because I think that it's plain to see that there's, the service experience market is hugely important. There's a huge amount of activity and investment and enthusiasm and interest and commentary around this. And sometimes it can feel a bit daunting. It's like it's a massive and expanding sort of field. So it's not just about customer experience, but the employee experience, about agent experience. It's also about how the company behaves and so on and so forth. And it's a bit like, whoa, it can feel a bit daunting sometimes. So I often, and almost always kind of asking people when I'm speaking to them on the podcast is to boil it down for people that are listening. And it's like to say, if I was to ask you for what would be your best advice to someone listening in who wants to improve their customer and employee experience? If you had to boil it down and say, my best advice is do this, then what would it be?
Really good question. I think there are 2 things that are really important. Number 1 is talking to your frontline agents. Mm-hmm. They know what customers are saying and what challenges they have. A part of that is also to look at the data. Why are your customers contacting you? Use that information to make changes to your product, to newsletters, to shipping notifications, to your website or processes, and continue to measure this so you ensure that the changes you make have the desired effect. So that's my number one recommendation to do. Number two is to focus on metrics that measure the customer's experience with a brand and not performance metrics. And metrics that measure the customer experience are CSAT, is NPS, first contact resolution, and total time to resolution. And brands that make it effortless for customers will continue to be winners regardless of what vertical they're in.
Awesome. That's kind of like, there it is, ladies and gentlemen, boiled down for you in two distinct pots, according to Tue. I think that's great advice. So, Tue, one final thing before we go. So this is my, I know we talked about your research that Dixa produced. This is my piece of longitudinal social research, I call it. It all sounds quite fancy, but actually what I've been doing ever since kind of like 2019 when Punk CX first came out is I've been asking people a couple of almost like word association type of questions around so Punk CX and now Punk XL, which explores this idea of what experience leadership is and what it looks like. And so the first question I have is like, what one, or maybe two words, if you like, what one word would you use to describe a more punk approach to customer experience?
I don't even think two words can do it, but dare to be different springs to mind. I think it's very much about challenging the status quo and being brave enough to go in a different direction.
Like it, dare to be different. Yeah, no, it's absolutely, that's right at the very heart of what being punk is all about. It's not just about, it's not about having kind of green hair. It's about daring to be different and being okay with that. And so the second question I have is, what company or brand do you think is an experience leader and why? And so a little bit of context on that is that, so Punk CX was focused primarily on customer experience. Punk XL was this idea that I think things have changed dramatically over the last couple of years. And I think that we've seen it's no longer sufficient just to talk about customer experience. We need to talk about customer, employee, stakeholder, leadership, the kind of the whole thing. We have to talk about the whole domain. And I know that we talk about brand leadership, we talk about technological leadership, we talk about market leadership. And I think it's about time we start talking about experience leadership, not just on an individual level, but a kind of also a global kind of organizational level. And so I want, given all of that, what company or brand do you think is an experience leader and why?
My brand here is Too Good To Go, the food saving app that connects brands that have excess food with people who want to buy cheaper instead of letting it go to waste. They have a very high corporate social responsibility, very focused on sustainability and do good. And I think we will see more of that in the future, where customers, they want to engage with a brand where they can recognize themselves. And if you look at Too Good To Go, when you save a meal in the app, then you are asked to rate the experience on a scale of 1 to 5. And then you can add what you specifically liked. It's value for money, quantity, quality of the food, friendly staff, the variation, and quick pickup. And for each place that you can get food from, you can see their rating and the top 3 highlights over the last 6 months. So this is also something that is rolling over the last 6 months and not just since the beginning of time, because things change. And a brand that really focus on doing something that is good for the environment, that is good from the planet in the long run, is something that I think is an experience leader today.
Awesome, I love it. I know about Too Good To Go. I love kind of what they're trying to do. I mean, it's right at the very heart of the waste problem that gets brushed under the carpet a lot of the time, and afflicts many different industries. But they're doing some amazing things in that sort of food kind of waste space. So thank you for that, and thank you for highlighting kind of them and the great work that they do. But to it, that's all I have. I'm done. So I just want to say, first of all, nice to see you again. I've got, ladies and gentlemen, I've had a bit of a faulty camera, so I couldn't even wave to Tue kind of this, but that doesn't really matter because this is an audio. But I am waving back to you, even though I can see it. But I want to say Thank you for joining me today. Congratulations on the work that you do at Dixa. Keep it up. Keep fighting the fight, and as you say, focusing on the agent experience, because that's important when it comes to delivering a good customer experience. Thank you for the conversation. I think there's some really interesting stuff in there. I think the research highlighted some really kind of important problems that we've got to tackle. And finally, just thank you for joining me today and sharing your time and your insight and your experience with us. That's been super cool.
Thank you, Adrian. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope to see you next time, and have a really great day.
Thank you. Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do, actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. But one final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.